Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for our Creative Forces session this afternoon and evening, depending on where you're coming from. Thanks for hanging in there with us. Sorry, we were a little bit behind the clock. We are live, so there's always a little bit of technical things that we're figuring out, but nonetheless, here we are. And I'm really excited to be joined today by Benedict Spence. So thankful to have you here. How are you doing tonight?
Thanks, Megan. Yes, I'm really good, actually. It's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I know you're coming to us from London, is that right?
I am, yes. I'm currently in East London, where I was born and where I live now. Yes, I've been working on a commercial today, and it's about 10:30 at night. So part of me is a little bit tired, but part of me is also very excited to be here to talk about things with you.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm really excited. Thanks everyone for watching at home. And let me introduce you to Ben a little bit deeper. And then we're going to go into talking about this show specifically, The End of the Effing World, and really dive into his approach, his aesthetic. We'll talk about camera choice and lighting and lenses as well. So lots to get into here. We also have some material to share with you. So I'm joined today by Benedict Spence. He's a cinematographer based in East London. He started making horror films with his friends in his teens, shooting 8mm video. I love that intel there, Ben, so we'll definitely ask you some things about that.
Wonderful, good. I can't wait.
I wish I had some of those clips to screen.
They're actually on my Vimeo. They're password protected on my Vimeo. I've got 4 feature-length awful horror films sourced on 8mm videotape, which no one's ever allowed to see. So there.
Yeah, they exist somewhere. He also was editing tape to tape in his school's media department. After a 3-year TV university course, he started work as a freelancer in 2002. He worked as a lighting cameraman on TV shows like MTV Cribs and Pimp My Ride, as well as countless documentaries, reality shows, and children's television shows, while also shooting short films and music videos on the side. Slowly, he started shifting his career into commercials and dramas during the late 2000s. In the past 5 to 6 years, Benedict has become a full-time commercials director of photography with a few dips into drama and scripted comedy. And most recently, he was nominated for an Emmy Award for his work on The End of the Effing World, which is on Netflix, which is what we're going to be focusing on today. So congratulations, Ben, about that. How does that feel?
It feels really weird. It feels like a sort of weird out-of-body experience. Yeah, it's really exciting. It's about as good as you can get for TV stuff. I'm thrilled. But it's bonkers. In fact, I've never been nominated for anything in my entire life. So to be straight into being nominated for an Emmy is very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did see though that you were nominated, or no, I'm sorry, you won a BAFTA earlier this year.
The show won a BAFTA earlier this year, about 3 weeks ago. Best drama at BAFTAs. It also won Best Supporting Actress for Naomi Ackie, so it won two BAFTAs, which again is like an amazing, exciting achievement. I don't come from a drama world. Lucy Forbes, the director, doesn't come from a drama world. So to shoot and direct a show which is won a BAFTA is a real thrill. It's very exciting times.
Wonderful. Well, I'm excited to share with our viewers some of the clips from that show, as well as some of your lighting and camera diagrams to really take a look at your approach.
Great.
So before we go into the show, I always like, especially since you talked about, in your teens doing 8mm video, do you remember when you decided that this could be a career? Like, was that a surprise for you? Like, oh, I could do this as an actual career, or was it something you knew all along?
You're going deep here, Megan. This is good. In all honesty, the moment what it was my 13th birthday, and I'd just seen Jurassic Park in the cinema, and I was falling asleep in my bed, and there's a poster which said Jurassic Park on it, which I had framed upstairs in my flat, in my apartment. And I went to sleep thinking, I want to be a scientist and make dinosaurs come back to life. Just before I fell asleep, I thought, actually, no, I want to make films and make people think that dinosaurs have come back to life. And since then, I've just always known that's what I wanted to do. It's been like with your little description of my career, just then, it's been a real sort of journey of a career. I definitely haven't gone straight to directing Jurassic Park. like I thought I might when I was 13 years old, before I knew what a director was. But yeah, and certainly, so since then it's been, you know, I just started doing it. I got very lucky. I worked over one summer when I was about 14, I think, and I bought in New York, in fact, I bought a, you know, sort of $300 lowest of the low 8mm video camera, and then I used that to make films with my friends. And in fact, the first time we edited, we didn't even edit tape to tape. We edited in camera. We just hit record and then cut. We made a sort of, you know, rubbish slasher movie. Right. And as an awkward teenager in London, that was what I did for fun. I didn't go out clubbing or whatever. I didn't go to parties. I wasn't cool enough. I used to make stuff. Right. And then it sort of gone on from there. And yeah, sort of 24 years later, I'm here. I am doing a live stream with you.
I love that you said editing in camera, because from getting to know your work and you know, what we'll talk with the audience about is your approach. Is you definitely, you know, seem to have a foundation and like a rule following, and editing in camera, you have to do that, right? You have to, you know, follow.
Yeah, you gotta be really strict. Yeah, totally. And also even later on when I learned to edit tape to tape, you've got to be really, really strict as well. And then yeah, so yes, I sort of definitely learned in a very weird, strict, awkward way. My first toes dipping into the filming world were in an awkward rule-based way. Yeah.
Right. Well, brought you here, so we're lucky for that. So tell us, so we're going to be looking specifically at season 2 of The End of the Effing World, and I will play a trailer shortly here so the audience can take a look at it. If you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend it. Ben, why don't you talk a little bit about how you got involved with this project?
So I have a very good friend in director Lucy Forbes. Lucy and I have worked together for sort of 12, 13, 14 years, something like that. We started working on, you know, reality TV in the sort of mid 2000s. She was a producer, I think, then, and then she started directing as well. And I was a lighting cameraman, is what they used to call me in the day. And we sort of started working together then. As our careers both developed, we started doing a few little short films and then some commercials. And then one day in 2018, Lucy asked me to shoot a pilot which she got for a show called In My Skin, which in 2019 went on to win a BAFTA for Best Drama as well, which is very exciting. Anyway, so we shot the pilot for In My Skin, which was about a school-age girl called Bethan who lives in Wales, and about her life, and people seem to like it. And off the back of that, Lucy Forbes, my director, got a call for The End of the Effing World series 2, and when she got the call, I just said to her straight away, I was like, yeah, you're going to get it. That's great, well done, because she's very good at meetings. And lo and behold, she got it, and she got me in the room for it, and I had a meeting with the execs, which I didn't screw up too much, and they gave me a job, and here we are.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, I think that's a perfect intro. Why don't we actually, do you want to set it up a little bit? I'm going to play the trailer, but maybe just set up what the show's about.
Yeah, totally. So it's the same. I shot the second series. The first series is about 2 young people, Alyssa and James. James wants to be a serial killer in the first series. Alyssa wants to escape from home, really, I guess. They're 2 very awkward people who, I won't give anything away, they fall in love, they accidentally kill somebody, and they learn about life, and they learn about love, and they learn about what it is to be a person, and that's the first series. And then the second series, we find them a little bit more broken, a little bit further down the line, like we all are in life, you know, a little bit older, a little bit more broken.
Right. Right. Perfect. Okay, let's take a look. This is the trailer for season 2. Let me cue it up.
Hey, little sister, what have you done? Hey, little sister, who's the only one? Sister, who's your Superman? Sister, who's the one you want? Sister Shotgun, it's a nice day for a white wedding. It's a nice day to start again. I've been away for so long. I've been away for so long. I let you go for so long. It's a nice day for a white wedding.
Beautiful. Really nice job, Ben. I think something is so poetic about all the images too, even when I just see the trailer like that.
Oh, good. I'm glad you like it.
One thing I was thinking about, I watched the show, I've seen both seasons, and I watched a couple to get ready for talking with you a little bit deeper. And, something I find so interesting about the show is it's kind of like a dark comedy, right? Like there's these kind of moments of humor throughout it.
Yeah. Oh,
but
yeah. It's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny, but it's not sort of, whoop, I've fallen over comedy. There's nothing slapstick or silly about it, but it is incredibly funny and incredibly sharp, as well as being incredibly dark.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. So I think, thinking about those themes, it's interesting to kind of see how you took those themes and, portrayed it visually, right? Which is what we do as cinematographers. So kind of to get started, I think it'd be great to hear, what's your preparation process like for something like this, especially since you had said you hadn't done tons of narrative. And so you got the job and you get the script. How does your mind kind of start breaking it down?
Well, first of all, you go, oh shit, I've got a lot to do. I've got to film all this thing. I mean, you get given a script, and it's you go, oh wow, there's a lot of things in there. There's a lot of scenes in there which I've got to film, and it can be quite overwhelming, to be honest. Like, and every time I've ever done a series, it feels overwhelming when you get those scripts. So, and that's where it all begins, is those words. And we had a fantastic writer, Charlie Cavell, who wrote the first series and the second series, and she is a little genius. She's one of the smartest people I know, and she writes amazing stuff, structure, words. She's brilliant. And so initially you get those scripts and you really just try not to panic. And my own process is I read them a couple of times. I read them once just to try and enjoy them. I read them again with a few little bits of note taking. And then you strike up a conversation with director and start to talk through how on earth you're gonna film this. And for me, without not being specific about the end of the effing world, for me it's always about trying to identify where the key moments are in the script, and where characters change and where narrative changes, and you've got a limited amount of energy and time in the world, so you definitely try and focus in on those just a little tiny bit more. I don't want to leave any scenes out in the cold, but just try and focus a little bit more, re-identify what those key moments in plotting and character are with the director. And then of course just try and find some general overall references and notes for what you want the show to look like. And there's nothing better than picking references. There's nothing better than taking someone else's work and saying a little bit like this. And so that's definitely a thing which I normally do with directors. And then I guess for this show, one of the things I guess we're going to speak about tonight is the rule book which we created was a very strict shooting style for the show, and so that was Lucy and I did that for In My Skin, the previous show we'd shot. We created a very strict rule book about how we shoot it, but that's also something we did for this, and certainly something which I don't necessarily do with all directors, but I definitely do with Lucy, and it definitely serves the way we work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is so interesting, and we're definitely going to dive more into that because I was lucky enough to read through some of it. So I have some questions for you on that I know the audience would like. You touched on something though that I want to ask you about further, which was your inspirations. And partly because, so this event that we're doing right now is Creative Forces. So actually how it started was we would bring a DP and talk about what their influences have been just throughout their career. And so maybe you could also speak on that, you know, in terms of, you know, we know Jurassic Park was one of them, but maybe you could speak on, you know, other films that you remember or really think of, and then we could talk specifically about The End of the Effing World as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I'll be totally honest. You know, the films I used to watch when I was a kid were, I didn't go to film school. You know, I didn't do that sort of thing. They're all sort of very mainstream. You know, all quite silly films. You know, I definitely don't have a highbrow taste in films, although that's definitely changing. You know, I you know, look up to lots of DOPs these days for sure. But you know, I sort of what I grew up on was certainly you know, a diet of mainstream, you know, Hollywood absolutely. of the 80s and 90s for sure. Right. But you know, but these days, you know, there's amazing, you know, there's some amazing DOPs out there, and not just shooting, you know, features, shooting, you know, shooting commercials and music videos. I mean, I'm terrible with names, and
no, don't worry about
I don't want to not name some people. You know, if anybody's watching, look at who I follow on Instagram and go follow those people, because there's some amazing people out there who just create amazing, inspiring work in America and also in the UK as well. I'm always shocked about how good the UK homegrown talent is. Yeah,
absolutely. And so then when you were getting ready for this show, you know, with the director and coming up with references, I know you had quite a few that you pulled from inspiration from. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess let me. I guess pretty the best way to start on for the second series of The End of the Effing World is to talk about the first series for a start. You know, which was also Emmy nominated for its cinematography. You know, it has this sort of very filmic and ultra minimalist look, and certainly when Lucy and I were brought on board, we were asked to not deviate from that too much. And Lucy and I were very keen to you know, to do more minimalism and to do more of a filmic aesthetic. So we definitely wanted to push the look. We wanted to really identify what the basis of that look was, and then really push it. And I guess really the sort of the look of a show comes from two places. If you were to create like an amazing high concept one paragraph note on the show, it would be the graphic novel on one side, which is sort of this ultra minimalist, black and white, line drawn, centrally framed, bleak masterpiece, mixed in with a sort of a kind of a 90s independent road movie, Coen Brothers, shot by early Roger Deakins type thing, you know, like a Fargo almost, or something like that, but something a bit more low budget than Fargo. And somehow you combine those two, and you've got The End of the Effing World. It's to give it a really sort of high concept. And I think that's and that's what the look of the show is. And it's amazing, you know, the number of times actually I went back to the graphic novel, and even though it is the most basic line drawn graphic novel, it's brilliant. Chuck Forsman, it was sort of a never ending source of minimalist inspiration for the show. And really everything about the show is sort of super simple, super minimalist. Everything from the cinematography to the art direction to the performances, even everything is pared back almost to the point of being abstract. And I think potentially that's one of the reasons why it's so popular, because when something is that minimalist and abstract, you can put your own emotion into it and you can put your own thoughts into it. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I think, you know, I saw in one of your interviews, you mentioned the word honest, that you felt like, you know, you always wanted to remember the approach to lighting and cinematography for the show was honest. And I think that you can feel that when you're watching it, and also the actors' performances and what they're going through. It's a little raw, you know?
So certainly for me, the sort of this feeling of sort of honesty and sort of simple filmmaking drove us right throughout the production. Even in places where I perhaps was a bit too honest, where I wanted to get a bit. I look now and I think, there's some stuff in that trailer where I'm like, oh my god, why don't I get some polyboard in for Jess? You sort of really wanted to pare everything. We really wanted to pare everything back and do almost nothing and have a very honest picture at the end of it. Have cast looking quite real, and essentially my sort of view was, I almost played it like a role-playing game. I almost played it like a sort of, if this was a 90s indie movie, what would this look like? If we didn't have much money, if we were fresh out of film school, what would these things be? And you almost to a point of leaving in mistakes. And in fact, there's a couple of times where there's a bit of camera wobble and we left it in, for example, just to give a little bit more of that sort of simplicity. I mean, if I had a chance to go back now, I maybe put more sort of gate weave and things like that in it. And if I was to reference something now, it would be things like Marriage Story, which obviously shot on film, but is sort of amazing. Again, also sort of simplistic aesthetic where almost nothing is done. There's only one or two lights on any scene, and it feels very honest and it feels very real. And that's definitely what we're trying to do with the End of the Effing World Series 2.
Absolutely. So then tell us more about the rule book, because I think a lot of our viewers would be really interested in that. It sounds like you'd already done this once before with Lucy, the director, for your previous pilot.
Yes. So I'll talk about In My Skin very briefly. So our previous show, In My Skin, was a story about a young girl, Bethan, and she was in every single scene and everything was pretty much from her point of view. So one of the rules we came up with, for example, was she'd always have a clean single and everyone else would be shot dirty over her shoulder. So she was in every single shot in the entire series. We ended up shooting a whole series of it, but there is not a shot without a little tiny bit of Bethan in it. It's her story. All the coverage is centered around a sort of 35mm lens where she's right bang in the center, and everything else is over her shoulder from her POV, not strict POV, but from her perspective. And so that we found out that worked really well, and that really helped us simplify our coverage. If that's your rule, oh my god, you can straight away work out your coverage straight away and concentrate on other things. And so we wanted to bring that same sort of way of working to the End of the Effing World, and it felt like we didn't have a lot of contact with the guys who did the first series, but it felt like there was some rules from the first series. For example, the centrally framed, everything being centrally framed, which was from the first series, which was in turn taken from the graphic novel. So we sort of started with that, and that was our first rule, which we put into the rule book. And then we sort of did a little bit of combination of working out what we think they might have done in the first series, mixed in with what we think worked. And we sort of extended this rule book into about 20 pages of various visual rules. And I guess, the headlines for me about the rule book are, number one, it gives you a strong visual style. I guess we can go into the individual points in a bit. But number two, it doesn't reduce creativity. It actually increases creativity. It's strange when you sort of really focus in on one thing and you do one thing very, very, very simply. It allows you to explore that simple thing in creative ways. Right. And actually, things like the central framing, you're never thinking about, how am I going to frame this? Am I going to put them left of frame or right of frame? Where's the looking space? It's centrally framed. So all those little brain cycles, of which there are a limited amount in a shooting day, can go on to the lighting or the performance or something else in the frame. So it definitely expands creativity. It shuts off certain areas and allows you to really focus on other ones, which is it's a new experience for me. But apparently, Megan, people do this all the time. But at the time, it felt like we discovered something amazing and new and exciting. Well, but apparently, this is a thing. I wish I'd gone to film school. I'd known all about this years ago. I should have gotten Emmy then.
But I think to read through how detailed you went, I would say, not everybody does that detailed of a rule book, and it's so clear. And so I could definitely see how, like you said, people might think it sounds restricting, but actually it's answering questions for you, and then that leaves your creative mind to, elsewhere.
Absolutely, totally. It is definitely not restrictive. In fact, it's the exact opposite. One of the reasons we came up with the rule book initially actually was also to hand over to the second block, because Lucy and I were very keen. You don't want to dictate what the second block do. You don't want to really force them to do certain things, but we wanted to make sure that that style continued and was as smooth as possible. So really, I guess, the creation of the rubric was partly for us and also partly for the handover to the second block. Again, that's the first time I've done block shooting before, but I've shot both blocks. But it's the first time I've ever handed over my baby to somebody else. And it's a weird experience. You want to make sure when you give over your baby to somebody, you want to make sure there's some instructions.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I wish babies came with instructions, but that's a different story. What about, speaking of collaboration, is the rule book something that you would share with your gaffer and lighting director?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, the rule book I share with all my crew, just so they could understand where we're coming from, and just so that if I'm off doing something and the grip and the focus puller line up a shot, they know that it's got to be centered and there's got to be no tilt on it. So yeah, and it's it's a nice thing to show people and to get my collaborators, my camera, grip, and lighting department collaborators to all come together. Yes, right. Absolutely. I'm a great believer in sharing references, especially with with sort of grip and gaffer, and also camera department as well. But I think the more you share and the more you show that you want to be creative and that you have an aim, a visual direction you want to go in, the more everyone can push or pull in the same direction.
Right. Absolutely. Now let's talk about a little bit about the format, because I'm thinking of two things here. One is, the central framing in watching it. I think there's something about central framing that can be kind of like awkward and off-putting because we're not used to it, but it's also so beautiful in these portrait modes. And I know you shot season 2 in large format. So I think,
yes.
When you're center framed on a talent, in large format, it's so gorgeous. So could you speak on, what made you choose large format for this project?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, Megan, I don't know, what camera are you shooting on currently?
Well, just something I found in the closet, the Arri Alexa Mini LF that we have here.
Oh, a large format camera, centrally framed as well.
Yeah,
Have you
I did that for you. I did that.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's very nice of you.
Yes, I also set the camera to daylight for you.
Wonderful. Yeah, you have been reading it. Brilliant. Wonderful. Great.
So we'll talk about that, but yes, I thought it would be fun to upgrade that.
So camera choice. So the first series was shot on a red of some kind. I'm not a huge fan of red. Sorry, anyone from red who's watching. I have used red for many years. They were very good. I don't like the way they handle highlights. They sort of clip very hard and they're not the most user-friendly camera on set, or they haven't been, who knows. So when I got asked to do the second series, I straight away started scrabbling around to look at what we could do, which wasn't red. And lucky me, the Alexa LF had just been released, or was reasonably new. And that ticked Netflix's 4K box and ticked my ALEV 4 sensor box, the Alexa sensor. Yeah, I mean, it just so happened that it was, the way Arri have made their LF sensor is, here's a normal Alexa sensor, and they put them together, taped to them together. So it's essentially made out of the same stuff, kind of, as a normal Alexa sensor. So I felt like I knew it well. So I felt like, I've been shooting the Alexa sensor since 2011 or something like that. I had a very early one back in the day. So, I feel like I know that sensor very well. Like, I know it inside out. I know what you can do with it. So it didn't take a lot of me getting up to speed on that. A happy byproduct of that is medium format sensor or large format sensor, whatever you want to call it, big old sensor, and everything that gives you, sort of, shallow focus, slight difference in sort of perspective, although people do like to argue about that on various forums. So it was, I was very glad, and the lovely people at Arri Rental in the UK did a camera for us, very cheap. so we can actually shoot on it. So yeah, I was very, very happy about that. One of the, I mean, I'll tell you what, I might as well talk about it now. One of the key things which I started testing the camera, and one of the exciting things for me was because you've essentially got double the number of pixels, because you've got two sensors, so you've got double the number of pixels compared to a normal Alexa. And obviously your output's always the same, whether it's 1080 or 4K, whatever it is, that doesn't change. Because you've double the number of pixels, you've essentially got half the noise. So as the noise increases, actually, because it's double the number of pixels, or being a bit noisy, you've actually got roughly half the amount of noise, which means you can rate the camera at double the sensitivity. So you can rate what Ari says an 800 ISO, EI, whatever sensor. You can rate the LF sensor, mini LF as well, at Lathing 1600 ISO with no penalty in noise. And then what that does is it opens up a whole nother stop in the highlights. So you get a whole nother stop of highlight protection, retention, whatever, without any price to pay in the bottom end. Which for a show which has a very specifically film aesthetic, especially with the grade, was an absolute dream. I mean, you could not burn anything out on that camera. You have someone inside, and there's a white van outside out the window, and it's not burning out. It's brilliant, because when you're talking about 13 or 14 stops of the normal Alexa sensor, another stop is a huge amount of information. You're a doubling of the information again. So it's like wow, that's a lot of info there which that camera can handle. So even though they say it's the same, I said myself, it's just made out the same stuff as a normal Alexa sensor, actually, because there's double the number of pixels, actually it feels quite different from a normal Alexa sensor, specifically on how it handles handlights.
Right.
So yeah, I was very excited to get going with that, with the 11.
Did you find that, especially rating it at 1600 for the whole thing, did you find that influenced and changed, how many lights you used, your lighting? I know we've got a lighting diagram we could pull up here in a minute as well. Yeah,
I mean, it's weird when, so the first answer is no, not generally, not day to day. You try and light something, and you try not to always light at the lowest possible level.
Right.
But what it definitely did open up, it was being able to rely on practicals a lot for lighting areas, and then also there's a couple of night exteriors in the show in forests, and that the shooting, be able to shoot at 1600 ISO, and also the fast Supreme primes we shot on, which are T1.5, which we can talk about in a second. But those two combined, fast lenses, fast camera, meant that the lights we chose were cheaper. They were RGB, they were sky panels, they were Ari sky panels, and they were quicker to set up than would have been otherwise. And we really pushed the camera. We really pushed the camera. I think we shot 2000 ISO a few times, wide open, poor focus puller. My first AC, Dan Villanueva, poor guy, but it really did allow us to do things which we wouldn't have been able to do normally, and allow us to get more time on camera and more time, with the cast performing. And really, that's why we were all there. So yeah, it's a super fast, high sensitivity camera and super fast lenses really let us do different things with the lighting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And speaking of that, I'd love to, you shared some amazing material with us, so I'd love to share this with the audience. The first thing I have is the bird's eye view of your camera and lighting breakdown for Alyssa's bridal scene, which happens in the second episode of season.
Yes.
So let me pull that up. So I have the diagram, and then we also have a couple of stills so you can see, what it looks like once it went to camera. Maybe talk us through this setup and some of these choices.
So yeah, I mean, I guess really, this is one of the most obvious ways to show how simply we worked in the show in terms of lighting and camera. I think it was, for me, it was all about really simple, minimalist filmmaking. And here is, I think this scene opens episode 2. It's the first time we've seen Alyssa from since the first series, and she's trying on her wedding dress. Really all we used here was a north facing window, so it's not south facing, there's no hard light coming through, so you're always going to be guaranteed something soft. You might get a bit of blue skylight if it's a sunny day, but yes, generally speaking, you won't have much of a change in that quality of light, whether it's sunny or not. A little bit of negative fill, or a little bit of negative fill very close, 4x4 floppy right close to her, and then a bit of 2K tungsten bounced into the ceiling. And you know, for me, you know, this fulfills lots of roles. Working this simply fulfills lots of has a lot of purpose. Number one was how we wanted to shoot the show, which was this sort of, you know, minimalist, you know, in 90s indie movie aesthetic. Number two is it's not a big budget show. You know, it's I'm thrilled that it's sitting in the Emmy nominations against you know, shows like Mandalorian and Homecoming, which are enormous mega budget shows. We don't have a lot of money, we don't have a lot of time, so all the solutions which I've got to bring to shoot this have got to be simple. And then also sort of, I guess, sort of third is, again, for cast, the reason we're all there, the more I can strip out, the more I'm not mucking around with a soft sun out the window, wherever it was, the more time the cast have, the easier it is for them to be on set imagining and doing their job, and the more takes the director gets at it all, really. So, you know, I sort of, this is definitely a sort of a very end of the effing world series 2 lighting setup. You know, what is the most simple way of doing this? And, you know, a lot of my input was, you know, talking to the director, talking to Jess Barden about the angle, about, you know, just putting the camera over to one side a little bit, you know, just so it's a bit more, she's a bit more side lit, just so the window's doing the wrapping exactly the right way, and then just bring that negative fill in. And I was lucky that I had a director like Lucy Forbes and Jess Barden who would allow me to get into the blocking with them and just like make that place her in the right place to get the light hitting her in the right way. And yeah, so this is definitely a sort of a classic end of the effing world 2 lighting setup, and there's barely any lighting in it.
Yeah, there's go ahead.
I know, I feel like I'm being lazy sometimes. I sort of look at it and go, was I just being lazy? I'm sure it was there. Is this all just a post-rationalization of me just being a bit lazy?
Well, I actually love that scene because I don't have a still of it, but there's a wide shot that you cut to. And again, it's the first time we've seen her. We don't know what's happened, you know, where she is, because she's not in the first episode. Yes. And so to see her, and she's obviously pretty young to be getting married, and so this wide shot of her in this, you know, beautiful but simple wedding dress, you know, is really striking, I thought.
That's good. Yeah, no, and it's an amazing wedding dress as well. Yeah, lots of chats about the whiteness of that wedding dress before we started shooting.
Yeah. So we have another one, and I actually have a clip from it. So let me get ready for this one. So this is from the same episode 2 of season 2. And let's see here. I know it's one of your favorite scenes, if I understand that correctly. And which one it is.
Yeah, which one is this?
It is when he's at the diner. So he's in the car and
yes, this, I mean, when you say favorite, it's probably the only scene which I don't absolutely hate with a passion. So yeah.
So maybe set this up just before I play it.
So essentially, episode 2 is just one big montage, which, you know, is an amazingly lucky. I'm amazingly lucky to be able to shoot something like that, because you can just throw every single little trick you possibly can at it. And this scene, if it's the one I think it is, it's in James's half of the episode, where, you know, in the first series he wanted to be a serial killer. He fell in love. He killed someone by accident, and he got shot. Spoiler. And then in the second series, he is broken, he's disabled, we've just killed his father, Alyssa wants nothing to do with him, or so we think, via her mum, and we've really just ruined this kid's life, and we've driven him down and down and down. You know, this sort of cool kid who thought he wanted to be a serial killer in the first series is now absolutely broken, and then he decides to go see Alyssa, and this is where we pick him up.
Beautiful. Okay, we'll take a look at the clip and then we'll break it down.
In a strange way, the bullet gave me a new lease of
Making sure
life.
you can see that, right, Ben?
I can, yes.
A reason to see Alyssa again. To check that she was okay. To see her again.
If your love was mine alone,
Hello?
if I had your heart to call my own, this would make me happy, and I'll be satisfied.
It's strange. When someone's very important and you haven't seen them for a long time. As soon as you do, it's easier to breathe.
Was mine alone. If I had your heart to call my own, this would make me happy, and I'll be satisfied.
I wanted to go and talk to her. But then I realized that it was okay if I just watched her. Watched out for her. Because you have to be vigilant with people. Bowling did seem slightly ambitious.
We're gonna pause before we get into that next one. But I love that scene. Actually, I didn't know which clip you were gonna wanna share, and I had just watched the second season again to get ready, and I really love seeing the cafe from the outside and him approaching it and everything.
Good. I mean, I honestly, I don't want to sound like some kind of weird narcissist, but it makes me well up that scene when Alex Lorth is out there and he's going to go see Alyssa and he's going to go see her for the first time since he's been shot and had a horrible life and his dad's died and everything like that. And yeah, I think it's an amazingly acted. It's just, again, subtly. There's not much there. It's just a little bit of face acting from Alex Lorth. And he gets me every time. So I guess it's that dusk scene which I guess we should talk about.
Yes.
Which again is sort of simple minimalist filmmaking, and I think I think I said to you at the start of this chat, one of the things which I was sort of keen to do is to really identify key scenes, and I think really for me there's not many things which, and this is a criticism of myself, there's not a lot of things which jumped out initially visually when I first read the script. Obviously there were, but there's not many things which hit me like a ton of bricks, and that scene hit me. I was like, oh my god, this is what this scene needs. Is it's dusk with the maybe the light from a cafe, let's make that red, and all these sort of things. And that's probably the only sort of shot on the first reading of the script way back whenever where I was like, that's what it's got to look like. And shooting at dusk is a shit show. It's a real fight, whatever you do, because really dusk lasts all of 20 minutes. Real blue hour lasts all of 20 minutes. So from the very start of prep, for me it was, and there's only sort of 6 shots in that tiny 15 seconds of screen time or whatever it ends up being. But for me that was something which was from the very start of prep was, I want to make space for that, and I want to make sure that we do that right and we get all the shots we need to tell that story at that moment. And yeah, I was lucky enough to have a first AD, Seth Adams, and a director who were willing to push for it. So I guess shall I tell you how we achieved that scene?
Oh, I muted myself. I'm back. I have that breakdown. Let me share it and you can kind of talk through it for this scene.
Right.
So same thing. I have the lighting and camera breakdown and then some stills of that scene as well. So take a look at that.
So I guess, for this scene, it wasn't about lighting and big lights. There was no lights in it at all, apart from the practicals of Medina. Our amazing production designer Dick Lund built Medina from scratch, and we built in a lot of LEDs into it for the neons, and we built in lots of dimmers for all the practicals. But really, essentially, what the key to this scene was making sure that we were hitting our timings exactly, and getting the camera into exactly the right place at exactly the right time, and everybody had to know exactly what was going on at any time. Otherwise, we wouldn't have achieved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shots.
Yeah, that's
shots. Yeah, 5 shots in what is essentially sort of half an hour. Normally, you do sort of 25 shots in a 10-hour day, but yeah, we had to shoot 5 shots in sort of about half an hour.
That's what I love. I love looking at this though and thinking about, this was your pre-planning. This was so that way on the day, it's more likely that you can achieve that in such a short time.
Absolutely, and I expect we probably spoke about this scene too much during prep, but certainly it was something which you've got to really as the DOP, you've got to really impress upon people that this is all critical, and the timings of this are absolutely critical. And again, I was lucky enough to have a first AD who really truly listened to me, and a director who truly listened to me, and who want to achieve something like this, because all the lights in the world, and you can't achieve dusk in that way. You can have 18 Ks up the forever going all over all the mountains, and you can't get dusk. You are tied into the movement of the sun around the earth. So it is all about timings and being in the right place at the right time. So I guess really, I'll talk through shot by shot. One of we had 2 shots essentially which we could get just before real blue hour. It still had to be after sunset, but that's shots 1 and 2 on there, where we could do a little bit of a trick white balance and a little bit of underexposure, and we could shoot those just before real blue hour kicked in. So you can see on that diagram, I hope everyone can read it, on shot 1 it says 3,800 Kelvin on the white balance. So a trick white balance. It's still daylight. It's probably entering into a slightly bluer, cooler world anyway. So that 3,800 white balance just really helped trick into looking like blue hour, because there's no other lights in the scene, because we're not seeing the cafe lights. You can kind of do what you want a little bit in that. You don't have anything else going off in that world, which gives away the white balance trick that you've done. So shots 1 and then shot 2 was a similar thing. I think we probably warmed it up. There you go. That's shot 1, which was done with a trick white balance, and then shot 2 here, which I expect that would have been right, and we would have shot that right up to the cusp of true blue hour. So we sort of would have wound the white balance back up to our normal 5,600 Kelvin white balance at some point on that. I think we just had a couple of floppies either side. I think we might have put a bit of black Bolton on the floor as well, just to really draw in the shadows on Alex Forster's face. Amazing costume he had. I love that jacket because it's brilliant, because it was just negative. He just walked around with negative fill wherever he went. It was such a great outfit. But anyway, so this second shot here was probably right on the cusp of the beginning of true blue hour. Again with a little bit of a trick white balance, and then we would turn around for the third shot, and when we turn around, suddenly you've got the practicals and the red LED playing, so you can't do a trick white balance anymore. If you were to trick a white balance, all those pracks would go neutral. So if you were to run a warmer or a cooler looking but a warmer number on the white balance, you neutralize all those practicals. So yeah, right now was really as we shot this in this order, right now is really the critical time to get all the shots in order. And then as we go through the shots into the next one, what we did was we rode the dimmers of the pracs and to a degree the cafe sign, and just started lowering those as the sun was setting, as the light in the sky was dropping, as the world was getting bluer and bluer and bluer. We'd ride those down so that they wouldn't look burnt out against the falling light. And I think, and there's a final one there, it actually, you can kind of, if you really dig into it, if you really look at it, you can kind of see a little bit of a difference. You can kind of see that the day has changed a little tiny bit. There's a bit of loss of detail behind the cafe and stuff like that. So yeah, so we just sort of rode all those down. Also, we had a technical issue with the cafe sign, which and the neons around it, which suddenly in the middle of a scene started blowing a fuse in the cafe, which is not what you want. And you test these things, you test these things, you test these things. It's like everything. It's like live streams.
Yes.
You test them, and you get there and they screw up, and you've just got to take a hit in it or make your best judgment. And we managed to flip the switch again and find the place we could bring them down to and run with it. And in theory, if you look at that, I think there's a little bit of this shot here, the last shot we shot of the scene. I've never liked the pinkiness of this. It's sort of a bit burnt out on the red there, because it was a bit brighter than really we wanted it to be. But no one seems to notice. So yeah, don't tell the Emmy jury committee, please.
I love the
we got the shots and we got the scene.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just gonna say, I love the silhouette here too, which I know was also in your rule book.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it was sort of a more of fun things to do section. But yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, actually, I think this for me was even though it's a 3.5 second shot, or not even, this for me was the shot which I had in my head from the very start. I don't say that to sound big-headed, because there was nothing else in my head the first time I read the script. apart from this one shot, and I feel very lucky that I have managed to film it.
Yeah,
get it out of my head.
Right. I think this would be a great time to check in with our audience, because I know you just covered a lot of information there. Thank you for sharing all of that.
My pleasure.
So let's see, Nick, do you have anything? I'm also joined, by the way, by Nick Samara from Able Cine. And Nick, do you have any questions for us?
Hi, everyone. Actually, Ben did a great job of answering a lot of them as they kind of came up, but we do have a couple that have popped in here. I'll start with a couple of them that we had as kind of pre-questions. To paraphrase, can you describe some things that you do to stay focused, especially when you're trying new things, you're trying to improve yourself?
Yes. So some of the things I do to stay focused. I mean, that's a very broad question. I drink a lot of coffee. I make a lot of notes. I write down notes all the time. My brain is like a sieve. I can't remember anything. I think I went to too many parties in my 20s. So I write down everything. If I want to remember something, if I want something in my head, I actually write it down, because otherwise it'll fall out. So for me, that's that. And then also references as well. There's nothing like an image to go, that's what I want to achieve, that's what we're aiming for. And it may look nothing like it, but at least there's something to aim for. At least there's a focus. And then yes, on set, I mean, I drink a lot of coffee. Yes, I guess that's it.
Coffee, I would say coffee certainly seems to be the de facto production lubricant, right? For sure.
It certainly is.
We did have another question that was actually very topical based on what you guys were just mentioning with the scene that you just broke down. Can you chat a little bit more about some of your favorite ways to enhance practical lighting, especially when they're not quite getting the job done? Maybe describe ways that you use other lighting instruments, but try to stay true to that source. Yeah,
absolutely. So, I mean, for me, I like to sort of create proxies, is what I call them. I'm sure it's not the right word. Proxies of practicals. So if you're using fluorescents, if you can, get the real fluorescents out the housing, put them on a couple of C-stands, put a bit of diffusion in front of them. There's nothing like that to have, to really, really feel like that's what's lighting your character. If you're shooting with tungsten light, I use China lanterns a lot, China lanterns in covered wagons, because they really have tungsten lamps in them, and so they match sort of tungsten practicals really, really well. So for me, I really try and get proxies, what I call them, of the practical lamps as much as possible, and use those, often behind a frame or whatever. But yeah, that's my key to using practicals. I guess what can I say about my use of practicals? Yeah, it's very easy to think you can rely on them, but you can't always rely on practicals. It's very easy to think, oh, just like the scene with pracs, but actually they don't always do enough. And it's also, I guess, a key thing for me as well, something which I always continuously write on my screw ups list, which is a thing which I keep a long list of all my screw ups, is to really keep an eye on those practicals, because you speak to the production designer, and even the production designer is the best production designer but even if the production designer is the best production designer in the world, like Dick Lund who we had on this, it's not his responsibility to make sure those practicals put out the correct light that you're expecting. So as a DOP, if you're relying upon practicals, you've got to be all over those practicals. You've got to know exactly what's coming. You've got to look at the color it produces. You've got to make sure you've got the bulbs for it, the dimmers for it. And you've got to understand what that practical does, because essentially you're talking about a light which you're bringing on set, which you're going to want to be using. So you wouldn't just ask for the brand new Sky Panel 5000 and not know what it does and not know how it works. So don't bring a practical onto set unless you've seen it, know how it works, know how the light spreads, and know what color it brings to the scene. And this is me talking from experience, from screwing it up too many times, and I'll probably continue to do that. So yeah, they're pretty my main thoughts about using practicals, really.
I think that's really good. Insight. Yeah, that's really good advice. I never thought about that before. You're right. We know our other lights in and out, so make sure the practicals are just the same.
And it's a DOP's responsibility. It's a DP's responsibility to do that. If you got a light on set, it's the DP. You know, you can't blame it on someone else. You can't blame it on the props master.
I think it's very telling in the even at the highest levels, mistakes are still some of the best teachers, right?
Yeah. Oh my God, that's how you learn. 100%. You know, you can't learn without screwing up.
Right on. We did have one other question that, or kind of comment leading into a question related specifically to the scene. One commenter noticed that the red saturation appeared much higher outside the diner, or was more intense. Can you speak to some of the factors that might cause that sort of thing to happen?
So the red saturation was outside the diner was more intense than inside the diner. I'm slightly confused by the question, but yeah, I mean, I think I guess I sort of touched on the fact that the dimmer went ping on that blue hour rush. So yes, certainly the later ones, it started to burn out a little bit. The red channel started to burn out a little bit, so you got a slightly more sort of salmony hue on those pracs, which we tried to pull back a little bit actually, but it kind of felt all right, in my opinion. No one's ever noticed until now, until that YouTube commentator, whoever they are.
Wonderful. Well, we've got one more scene to break down, and I think it would be really nice to take a look at this as well. So similar, we'll watch the clip and then take a look at your bird's eye view of the camera and lighting, and take a look at some stills too, and we'll welcome more audience questions for those. So Ben, this is the scene with James' dad. So if you could kind of intro that before I play it.
Is it the one? Oh, okay, I see. Yes. So this is again near the start of James's half of the second ep of the second series of the end of Effing Wells, and we're about to kill James's dad and put James through a whole host of misery and enjoy.
Beautiful. Okay, here we go.
Bowling did seem slightly ambitious, given that I'd only recently got the use of my legs back.
This is brilliant, isn't it?
But in the end, it wasn't me I should have worried about.
My soul, where can you be? I wait patiently.
I never went back inside our house. I couldn't even walk up the drive. There was too much sadness in there.
Where can you be? I wait patiently. When you're alone.
Bowling.
There we go. Thank you for sharing that. Really powerful scene.
Yep. Good old Alex Laughter doing his acting again. He's good at it, isn't he? Yep.
that's another one too, where it's, you know, heavy themes. There's a little humor in the very beginning, you know, this kind of dark humor, and then, you know, we see the real raw emotion there.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I'll probably talk about the only other shot which I don't hate on constantly in this episode, which is the lovely Alex Lawther lying on the back of his back seats of his dad's car.
Yeah.
Which again, you know, just sort of in fact, can we look at this the still
Yes,
first
absolutely.
up, I think. Thank you. You know, for me, again, it was that's such a moment, you know, that's, you know, we've really broken that kid, broken him hard. And, you know, there's a few scenes beforehand where he's disabled and he's in hospital and he's been shot and all these things. So, you know, this is a real moment. It's a real change from, you know, Alex wannabe serial killer to Alex hugging his dead dad's ashes in the back of a car. In fact, I can tell you a story about this specific moment. In fact, I actually wanted to do a little bit more lighting on this, and we were in the back of the car, and we'd taken out the front seat and we'd put the camera in there, and the camera was on a hi-hat. No, I think it was actually on an apple box, and I was just sort of lining up and sort of I wanted to do a bit more lighting fuss. For some reason, I think I wanted to put some more negative fill on the front window behind the camera. And Alex Lawther was, you know, really deep in an emotional place, and he said, "Can we just, Ben? Do you mind if we just go and just go for one?" And I said, "Yeah, okay, no problem at all." And I hit the record button, which is not normally my job, and I got my walkie-talkie because I was just me and him in the car. And I said, "Yeah, Alex wants us to go, so we're going. Camera speeding." And we turned over and we had an amazing, beautiful, sweet moment. I think we probably just did that one take, and that was it, and that's what's in here.
Wow.
So, you know, for me, I said it before, Megan. I said again, you know, the reason we're all there, the reason that I'm there, the sound guy's there, the gaffer's there, is to capture that emotion. And if there's anything that can be done to help capture that moment, even if it's record when you haven't got quite the negative fill that you want, that's you know, that's as far as I'm concerned, that's totally fine. And you know, like I love this shot and I love this moment, not particularly because I love the lighting or anything like that, but because I love poor James there hugging his dad's ashes, and it's the sweetest moment, and the saddest moment, and the darkest moment. So in terms of lighting this, yeah, I mean, again, you know, really super simple. Here you go. Here's an Arri M18 1.8 kilowatt HMI into some ultra browns. I think it was ultra browns. It might have been bleach muslin, but I'm pretty sure it was ultra browns. I mean, you got some negative fill over to the other side, just for a bit of shape. And what I wanted to do is put some on the windscreen, the front windscreen behind camera, to make the whole thing a little bit darker, but didn't have quite a chance. And I don't think it suffers. I don't think anybody knows. I think the audience would much rather see a real, honest moment with Alex Lawther as James than missing a tiny bit more negative fill. So yeah, it's a great moment. This is also and probably the reason you're picking up on it. So we had a quite strict lens selection on the show. Our lenses were 35, 50, 65, so 3 lenses right in the middle of the range. You know, there's nothing very wide there and there's nothing very long there, and we shot sort of 99% of the show, if not 99.9% of the show, on those 3 lenses, on those 3 Zeiss Supreme primes. But this is probably the only shot in the series, at least in my episodes, that we shot on a 25mm, and that was just so that we could see what we wanted to see. We couldn't get the camera back any further. The LF is an amazing camera, but it's big, and you know, took the battery cells back, pulled it right back, and we're like, well, you know what, it's worth a rule break to capture that moment in its entirety.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to hear you talk about that and think about the flexibility that you have to have as a DP, and also your ears open. You know, like you're not only thinking of listening to you talk, you're not only thinking about your objective, you know, you're watching, you're listening and reacting.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you don't exist in a bubble. I know there's sort of this view of a sort of DP of being like, I'm a visual artist, I need time to light, this is my set or whatever. I mean, I hopefully maybe one day, maybe if I win the Emmy, I'll think like that. But I don't bring myself to think like that. It's filmmaking is a truly collaborative process. For me, it's been ever since I used to make horror films with my friends back at school, and what I do now for a living, I'm very lucky, is an extension of that. Is I make TV shows with my friends. People like Lucy Forbes and all my crew are sort of, I'm very close to a lot of them. So I definitely don't think you exist in a sort of amazing DOP lighting bubble. I know there's some DOPs who get away with that, and more power to them, but certainly that's not how I operate.
Right. Awesome. Let's check in with our audience, since we just shared also another scene and a lot of information. Nick, how are we doing with our audience?
Yeah, let me see here. We'll save some of the more general questions for the end, I think, where they can kind of lump a lot of them together.
Sure.
But let's see. We did have a comment that said one of their favorite visual motifs in the series was a symmetrical two-shot, the main characters speaking to each other, looking straight ahead at camera. Can you share some of your kind of creative impetus for those sort of shots? Was that something that was part of the rule book, or were those the kind of in-the-moment things?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the sort of cheers, Nick. I guess yes, there's a lot of sort of two shots looking forward. I think for me, one of the sort of extensions to that, which we did in the second series, was I think there's a number of shots where you have, in fact, there's specifically one in episode 3 where you've got Jess on one side of a screen, quite hard one side of a screen, and James and Alex Lauter on another side. And we're still centrally framed, but we're centrally framed on the space between them, the empty space between them. I'm not sure I got a photo which I can instantly share of that. So for me, having a two shots where they're on two opposite sides of the screen, but we're still centrally framed, and what we're centrally framed on is the fact there's nothing between the two of them. So for me, that was sort of a little way of using the rules. It's a slight twist of the rules, but it definitely gave a bit of power to that shot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. Yeah, looks like most of the other questions we have here are more kind of just general career based. We can share those now, or if you want to do some more breakdowns, we can get back to those more toward the end.
So those are all the breakdowns. What I do have that I think we could share while we're kind of continuing talking here is, Ben, I have some just behind the scenes stills of you, your team, and the Airy camera and Airy lights as well. So I think I could just share that as we kind of talk through some other questions here. So let me pull that up. I know it's getting late in the UK for Ben, so I won't keep him too much longer.
It's fine. I've got loads of beers. We can keep on talking as long as you want, till the sun comes up.
Very good. Maybe I'll drop in a question real quick while you're pulling those up, Megan. We have a commenter talking about just starting out as a camera trainee and trying to find out ways to get experience with systems, specifically with Airy Alexa type cameras. And you have any tips on ways to gain experience with high-end cameras like that?
Yeah, I mean, to this trainee, I wish you absolutely the best of luck. You've definitely chosen the right profession. Yeah, I mean, number one, there's amazing simulators on the Airy website. Number two, I know this is easy for me to say, but phone up some camera houses. Send some emails to some camera houses. You'd be surprised how welcoming camera houses are to trainees, to people who want to have a look at the cameras, who want to have a go on the cameras. I think you've got to talk to people in a as a professional way as you can manage, but approach camera houses, facilities companies, and ask them to if you can go in and have a little play with the cameras. And yet you'll be surprised. If you ask 10 camera houses, 2 will probably say yes and say come on in, and you'll be able to meet them, and you get to play with their stuff. I know sort of places in the UK like Airy Rental, Panavision, probably shouldn't name a name, and good friends of mine at S&O Media are always very welcoming to people who come in and who are honestly keen to have a look at cameras. But also I guess my other point is, the intricacies of the in and outs of the cameras, aren't the most important thing. Really, I think the most important thing is a working knowledge of photography itself, working knowledge of a lens, an iris, and a sensor or a negative, and then processing behind that. So, you know, once you understand that, once you really understand that, once you understand your stops and what the physics of that are, of what the physics of a shutter is and what the physics of a sensor or a negative is, you know, that once you understand that, which you can do, you know, in the afternoon on Wikipedia or long weekend on Wikipedia, once you understand that, you can use any camera you want. And that's really what I would say to be aiming at, rather than, you know, learning, you know, at what the menu on the Alexa Mini LF is. You know, really concentrate on the general photographic knowledge first. Oh, there it is.
Now, Ben, I've got a question for you, actually, because I noticed in one of your biographies, you mentioned that you feel that so far in your career, you've kind of very much felt your way. And you know, you spoke about not going a traditional necessarily in terms of film school and everything. So could you just maybe talk about what that means to you, feeling your way?
Yeah, I mean, and this is not there's no value judgment in this. I didn't go to film school. I did a university course, but it was more sort of a TV production, like a reality TV production type course, a long time ago. Yeah, I mean, when I first started, if I'm being totally honest, this is going to make me sound terrible. When I first picked up a camera professionally and shot TV stuff, you know, children's TV or whatever it was, I didn't actually know what a DOP was. You know, no one ever told me. There was no, you know, there weren't any forums really or anything like that. This is, you know, 2000, 2001. There was no information which really told me that. I just knew I love films, and I was good at a camera, and I could use some lights, and that's what I did. So, you know, really, I definitely sort of, yes, felt my way through my career. You know, I feel like I'm a bit more on top of it now, but you know, I've been working on set for almost 20 years, which makes you feel really old and terrible. Well,
I mean, when I read it, what I thought about was the ability to, you know, have a discipline and also like go after opportunities. And that's what feel your way kind of means to me, is like, okay, this opportunity, I'm going to dive in, I'm going to go for it. And then takes you to the next step.
Oh my God, yes, totally. I mean, you know, if it's as a freelancer, I've never had a job, I've never had a wage or anything like that. You know, you're only as good as your last job, and you're only, you know, your career is only progressing as much as you can push it, really. You know, so yes, absolutely, it's about being an opportunist. But so is being a DOP. You know, DOP's being about being lucky. You know, if you had a key talent as a DOP, you know, get lucky with the right weather. You know, you can be an opportunist. If you see a lovely bit of sun, get the camera out there and shoot something in it. You know, really, you know. So for me, in a meta and a macro way, yeah, being an opportunist is really important. Mm-hmm. But not being an asshole about it.
Right, exactly.
Very important kind of caveat there, isn't it?
Just a little one. Yeah.
We had another good technical question mentioning, yes. They say that they understand that you're typically using a technical LUT for when you're doing your exposure analysis. How do you handle that when you have to view multiple LUTs, or is this a sort of thing where you just have one show LUT for the entire thing that even the director is seeing?
So now's a good time to talk about Toby Tompkins. Toby Tompkins from Cheat was the colorist on the first series. He was the only person who stayed over from the first series in terms of camera or lighting or anything like that. He's an absolute genius. He's brilliant. He created, after we did some camera tests, he created a single show LUT for us. Which gave a bit of contrast, a bit of blue in the shadows, did lots of amazing genius Toby Tompkins tweaks to the picture, but was just in essence monitoring LUT. And one of the things that LUT did was it did about a one-stop pull on the picture down. So, you know, obviously the look of a show is very down. The look of a show is these sort of rich deep blacks, sort of almost like pushed film. And what I was keen, especially after talking to Toby, what I was keen on doing was not actually necessarily fully underexposing the camera all the time just by rote, just because I could. What I wanted to do was to make sure there was a sort of a reasonably dense exposure for him in there for when he got to the grade. So the one-stop pull on the monitoring LUT, that allowed me to give a dense exposure to not just plain old underexpose, but what it meant was all the monitors showed quite a down picture, so I wouldn't have any execs or director shouting from the monitor, it's too light, make it darker, because it was by its nature quite dark. So in my viewfinder on the Arri Alexa LF, I had Rec 709, and it always looked a bit gross and bright. But on my onboard monitor, which is a small HD 7-inch, I had the show LUT, and then director and everybody else had the show LUT as well. So it had a one-stop pull on the picture to make it all a bit denser and a bit more, all a bit more down, and look a bit more like the show should. But yeah, in my viewfinder, I spent 3 months looking at a ghastly, sort of weird looking Rec 709, super bright version of the end of the effing world.
Very good, and kind of somewhat related on this, a poster mentions about your love of the X-Rite color checker. Can you speak a little bit about your experiences using that and why you kind of gravitate toward that?
Yeah, why not? So I mean, I've got quite a quick one. I mean, the plan was with that was to take an X-Rite, shoot something on film with it, take an Alexa camera, shoot something on it, and then match all the color things up across the two of them, and you got an amazing film effect. The honest answer, if I'm going to have some 11:30 UK time at night honesty and a 2-beer honesty, is that Toby Tompkins, colorist, did not need that, and he didn't really use it. And to be honest, it felt like, retrospect a bit, as a lot of fuss for something which actually didn't really work terribly well. And Toby Tompkins did a much better job than any of our attempted matches. However, I will say that they make really good Instagram fodder. They look quite cool, and everyone's always like, "What is that? What are you doing with that? What sort of board is that?" And I get to pretend to be cool.
I was going to ask you about that actually, because I noticed that you do have a substantial Instagram following, and I think, obviously it's the perfect time to kind of ask that, because as a DP, you also have to, get your work out there, get your personality out there, and a lot of people don't know how to do that. So maybe just tell us, how did that come about for you?
Yeah, I mean, it came about for me because I'll be totally honest, Megan. I've 2 beers honesty in me. About 4 years ago, I felt like my career was going nowhere, and I felt a bit frustrated with what I was shooting. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, even, I felt a bit frustrated with what I was shooting, and I felt like I needed some kind of creative outlet. And Instagram was a place where I could be totally in control of what I did and what I put forward. It wasn't necessarily the rubbish advert which I was shooting for nappies or whatever it was at the time. I could put whatever I wanted out there. I could still go shoot the rubbish commercial for nappies, but I that wouldn't be necessarily what I had to put out there. So it was that. Also, for me, just as a general voice, it meant I could put my voice out there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, Instagram is a very easy thing to get sort of a bit obsessed with, and it's something which I'm very keen not to get obsessed with. And anybody who's listening, I would recommend, do not get obsessed with Instagram. It is not the real world. Don't get jealous about what other people are doing on it. If that's the case, sack it off, delete the app. What I like about it is, for me, it gives me my own little space, which I'm in charge of. I can put the work I want out there. If I've done nothing but nappy commercials for 2 months, I can go take a fun photo of the sunset and put it on there and do a smart ass comment, and there's that. So for me, yeah, Instagram is my little stomping ground where I'm the boss of what goes out there, not some weird clients or anything like that. And yeah, and I during lockdown, it's been great because I've got lots of followers. They're really nice, and they're always really interested in what I say. I don't know why. So I feel like I've been able to put a few things out there and give some hints and tips and various things like that, with a sarcastic wink in there somewhere.
Right. Absolutely. I was just going to ask you what I know you mentioned you were working today, so I know work is kind of gearing back up for you, but what are there other things that you do, non-work related, to keep you kind of inspired and creative, especially when the world wasn't working?
Yeah, I mean, I watch a lot of films, watch a lot of TV shows. There's some amazing TV shows out there nowadays. And just take photos as well. And this is probably, if we're talking about sort of advice for up and coming filmmakers of any kind, just start filming stuff, just start taking photos, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be good, it can be absolute crap, but the sooner you start, the better. So for me, during lockdown, what I really enjoyed was picking up a stills camera, and really that was my only creative outlet. So I took a lot of photos, most of which I won't share because they're terrible, but these days you can shoot a feature film on your phone. So the best thing you can do, if you're at a loss of what to do, if no one's getting back to your emails, if no one's following you on Instagram, whatever it is, just pick up your phone and make a film. Just practice your art, because apparently it takes 10,000 hours or more to become a master at anything. So just get some hours in.
Right. Right. And like we said earlier, you learn from mistakes and you learn from experiences.
Absolutely. And one of the big things which I have said to lots of people as well is I've only done this for the past 4 or 5 years, start making a list of your mistakes. I find them really therapeutic. Every single job I do, I screw up a number of times. When I screw up, I don't dwell on it. I don't let it fester in me. I write it down, say, don't do this again. And I've got I've got a notes thing on my phone. Here we go. It's called Work Lessons, and it is long.
I love it.
You can see that. Hopefully you can't see that. You can't actually see it. Good. Don't sort of things and notes about. But it's a huge, great long list of all the screw ups I've done, and I actually would definitely recommend that. 1, practically you learn from your mistakes. 2, actually it's quite therapeutic. So if there's any sort of up and coming DPs out there, I would definitely say start your screw ups list. The sooner the better.
Great idea. You get it out of your brain and you move on, but you remember it for the next time.
Absolutely.
But I have to ask you, because you've said it a couple of times, and I think this is the right time to ask you. You mentioned the scenes we looked at were not just your favorites, but the ones that you didn't hate. So what do you mean by that? As a creative, what do you mean?
Well, I don't know. I don't know many big time DOPs, but I bet you, I expect that if you got Roger Deakins in here, sat down, he would probably hate the majority of the shots in the majority of his films. I could be wrong. I'm totally willing to be wrong. But I think any creative doesn't like the majority of what they put out there. I certainly don't. Everyone's their biggest critic. And that's why it's so sort of dumbfounding when you get an Emmy nomination. You're like, what? With all those weird lit shots, with all those things where the lighting is not quite right and the color is a bit funky. So yes, the vast majority of my own work I obviously dislike, but I think that's probably true for most people.
I think
creative arts.
Exactly. I think a lot of different artists of any kind, it is difficult. But I had to tease you a little bit there.
And for me, there's lots of things, there's lots of lessons which I learned. So my lessons learned on The End of the Effing World is huge, and lots of things which I still can barely look at on it. It was weird, in fact, the day before the show came out, I think it came out in the UK last November. Lucy and I, after having sat in the grade for a couple of weeks, just before it went out, really, Lucy Forbes, director, and myself, really got eaten up horribly by hating the show and thought we'd actually really totally screwed it up. It's a weird thing. I look back and go, well, I think, it was weird. Why were we so worried? Obviously, we did it amazingly. Obviously, we did a fantastic job.
Yeah. Speaking of Lucy,
I came across the saying early on in my career from a mentor that said, "Art is never finished, only abandoned." So I feel like that maybe cuts pretty close to that.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It's definitely correct, Nate. Yeah. Definitely.
I was just gonna add one thing before we go back to the audience, or ask you a question. Obviously, it sounds like you have a wonderful working relationship with the director Lucy, and you had worked with her prior. What do you think? What are aspects of your working relationship that you could speak about for people that are, DPs that are looking to find that type of director that they could really collaborate with? What are the types of things that work really well with the two of you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've most of my directors are people I've worked with for many years whose careers have increased and have gone up and or whatever, got better, and they've taken me with them. Lucy's is a good example of that. It's most base level. It's a shorthand. It's finishing each other's sentences off. It's being on the same page. Having been through stuff together, a decade plus of being on shoots together, knowing how each other reacts, and it's an exceptionally lucky place to be in. I'm definitely, it's not something which you can just put that sort of relationship. You can't just pull it out of the hat. Sometimes you can, and you get along very well with new directors instantly. But that real long-term, deep relationship where you really, really know somebody creatively is I was very, very lucky to have that with Lucy. Really, it boils down to a shorthand. It boils down to a place where we are literally finishing each other's sentences off, and we know what the other one's thinking as they're saying it, and before they finish saying it. But also it's a sort of and I guess this maybe is not quite as important in America because you guys say what you think a bit more, but in England we don't always say what we think. And so, to be able to say what you think to a friend straight away and not beat around the bush, and to be really, really quick and say, I don't like this, or we need to do this. So for example, if Lucy says, I don't like this straight away to me, I don't bat an eyelid. I go, okay, great, well, let's change it then. Or if I say to her, we need to finish this scene because otherwise we're screwed on the next one, she will listen to me straight away. Directors and DPs don't always work with that kind of clarity. There's a lot more ego involved. So yeah, with Lucy and I, there's definitely no ego.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's great.
Fantastic stuff. I think we got time for maybe one more, and so there's actually a pretty good one I've sort of been saving from the pre-questions that we had here. I think it's pretty topical that you'll enjoy for that. But I think we kind of already know how you feel about it, given how forthcoming you've been with your excellent insights and diagrams from set. But they say, first off, congratulations on the Emmy, well deserved. And then they share some personal experience with the kind of a culture of guardedness around information, maybe a little bit of, kind of a secret club culture for camera departments and cinematographers. And do you find that it's better to be more open about how we share technical and creative information with one another? And they do finish off by saying, hope you drink too much.
Yeah, I mean, I'll continue my second beer. It's actually my third. I mean, I think that's a really good point. And, there's a lot of snobbery about what we do. There's a lot of people who think they're wicked because they're a DOP. Wicked being good. That's an English phraseology. I've never been like that. I don't prescribe to that way of thinking. Subscribe to that way of thinking. I think information should be shared. I don't think disinformation should be shared. I think information should be shared. And I think the main thing is to continue the art. Our art is built up generationally. Art isn't, no one pops out of the womb and is a great artist. They learn art from what people have done before. You reference stuff and you copy stuff, and that's how you learn to become an artist. And surely to put that, that technical information, what we do as DPs is so grounded in technical information, to put that technical information out there is surely a service to the art. And surely the service to the art is more important than a service to yourself. So yes, I think a lot of people are very hold all their tricks close to their chest, but for God's sake, put them out there. Like let's all have a go on whatever magic filters that you've decided to use. It's great that you did, but your show's out there now, so come on, let's tell everyone how we did it, because that'll make the next show better. We all like watching good TV shows, and films, so let's make the next generation of films and TV shows better.
Yeah, I agree.
I know it's a bit of a rant, sorry.
No, I love that perspective. I think that's great. And I thank you so much for everything you've shared and been so forthcoming with your knowledge and mistakes and things you've learned and loved along the way. So really appreciate all that from you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to get a 2 beers pissed and prattle on about sharing knowledge.
Absolutely. I'm going to thank our audience for watching with us and in the future. Thank you very much. And congratulations again, Ben, on the Emmy nomination, and good luck to you coming up here pretty soon.
Thank you.
And definitely everyone check out the second season of End of the Effing World on Netflix. So thank you again, Ben, and everyone watching, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you, Ben.